General Hospital spoilers tease that one of the most shocking developments is quietly reshaping the entire balance of power and trust in Port Charles, the emerging truth that Drew is no longer himself. All the dark, calculated, manipulative actions he's committed recently aren't a reflection of his character, but the result of something far more terrifying. He has been brainwashed. What was once dismissed as a moral decline is now being decoded as a chain of signs tied to a sophisticated and brutal mind control program, a twisted remnant of the neurological experiments and technology left behind by Peter, the man who once haunted the entire town. But what terrifies everyone even more is this: Drew is no longer a victim. He has become the one in control. And Willow, fragile, emotional, and easily wounded, has become the first target in the haunting plan Drew is now deliberately enacting. From the moment Willow was isolated from Michael through carefully crafted lies and subtle psychological manipulation, to Drew inserting himself into her life as a dependable, trustworthy figure, then emotionally controlling her, all signs point to her no longer acting on her own free will. Drew has used fake kindness to erase Willow's suspicions, to convince her that Michael abandoned her, slowly drawing her away from everyone who once gave her strength. Meanwhile, Drew has positioned himself as her savior, a shoulder she believes to be coincidental but is, in truth, the product of an intricately calculated psychological strategy. Willow's recent strange behavior, from her coldness toward her family to her passive submission to Drew, even her emotional attachment, can no longer be seen as random. She is being manipulated on a level beyond mere words. And if suspicions are correct, Drew has approached her using a dangerous mental conditioning technology, a form of gentle, persistent brainwashing that alters perception and belief over time. This technology, believed to be Peter's legacy after years of neural manipulation, is now being revived by someone once considered a symbol of integrity. And that's what makes the entire story so horrifying. Drew, once healed and saved, is now reusing the very tools that once broke him. The question now isn't just who brainwashed Drew, but what has he been reprogrammed to become? He is no longer resisting control, he is control, a model case of a victim turned into a calculated perpetrator. If Willow is the first target, who will be next? Carly, who once loved and fought beside him? Jason, who risked his life to rescue Drew from Cassadine clutches? Or even Sonny, now on the watch list due to Drew's increasingly secretive behavior? The deeper one digs, the clearer it becomes. Drew is no longer Drew. His eyes no longer show the look of a protector, but that of a watcher, tracking, calculating, planning. Every word, every decision carries an eerie detachment, like he's following a script written into his mind that even he doesn't fully understand. And while Willow still blindly believes in the comfort and protection Drew offers, viewers know she's being pulled into a spiral, where memories are rewritten, truth is distorted, and love becomes a tool for control. If this theory is true, General Hospital is entering a new dark era, where heroes are turned into villains through psychological manipulation, where the most emotionally vulnerable like Willow become test subjects, and where the line between free will and total control becomes dangerously thin. The coming battle won't be about power or reputation, it will be about souls, memories, and the right to decide one's fate. Willow may be the first, but she certainly won't be the last. And Drew, whether still a victim or now a mastermind, has officially stepped out of the light to become a new symbol of dread, a ghost wearing a familiar face, carrying out commands no one can hear. Drew is on track to become a completely new kind of villain in General Hospital, and what makes his transformation so terrifying isn't that he screams or behaves violently like past Port Charles antagonists. It's that he does everything in silence, with cold calculation, psychological control, and layers of deception so subtle that anyone could fall victim without ever realizing it. Once known as a loyal friend, a man of principle, and a protector of loved ones, Drew is now slipping further from the light of justice into a shadow so deep, even Peter never reached this level of danger. The most unsettling part? It's not explosive rage or a moment of trauma. It's a systematic, deliberate, strategic shift. From eroding Willow's trust, exploiting Portia's vulnerability, manipulating Nina's emotions, to slowly isolating Michael from those he loves, Drew is executing a quiet but terrifyingly effective psychological campaign. He doesn't instill fear through violence, but through the suffocation of trust. And that's what makes him a new breed of villain. No shouting, no killing, just silent observation and perfect timing. This rising madness within Drew is likely the result of deep, unhealed trauma, psychological fractures that no one noticed, or possibly, as many now fear, the outcome of mind control technology once developed by Peter. If Drew is no longer himself, but a controlled version of who he once was, then the horror isn't just about what he does, it's about who made him this way, and whether he can ever come back. While Port Charles still clings to the hope that Drew is just lost, every step he takes, every wound he causes, is pushing the town into a new realm of instability. Willow, nearly entirely isolated due to Drew's influence, is the clearest example of the scope of this change. She no longer recognizes the emotional manipulation, no longer seeks reconnection with those who once mattered, instead leaning on Drew as her new anchor. The terrifying truth is, she doesn't know that anchor is pulling her deeper into the abyss. To Drew, Willow may be just the first, the easiest to manipulate. But if this model of control continues, no one is safe. Carly, Jason, Sunny, even the strongest, most clear-minded characters could be drawn into his psychological orbit unless they spot the danger in time. The darkest part of all this? No one truly knows Drew has changed. He still smiles, still shows up when needed, still speaks with warmth, but behind it all, he's executing a deeply deranged plan, a systemic personality overhaul, a psychological chokehold so well disguised that it's invisible until it's too late. In a world where characters have battled Helena, Peter, and Victor, Drew, once friend, once family, has become the greatest threat. Because he doesn't come from the outside. He comes from within. He was loved. And now he's unraveling everything Port Charles once believed in. This chilling transformation isn't just another plot twist. It's a warning. That no one, not even the best of us, is immune to darkness if we refuse to face and heal from old wounds. And when that darkness spreads, taking over the mind, manipulating the heart, the result is not a fallen hero, but a dangerous villain wearing the face of someone you once trusted. In his silence, Drew is opening the gate to a new, dark chapter. Where light isn't extinguished by shadows, but by those who once carried it. Drew is no longer just a man changed by pain, he is becoming a dangerous symbol of psychological control and emotional manipulation at the highest level. He is silently compiling a list of new targets to brainwash, methodically building a psychological empire with himself at the center of absolute power. After successfully testing his mind control tactics on Willow, Drew no longer hesitates. His new targets are now clearly defined. Nina and Portia, two women who were once allies, even supporters, are now becoming the next pieces in the mental game he is ruthlessly and mercilessly manipulating. Targeting Nina isn't simply about her connection to Willow or her past with Sunny. Nina has long been torn between redemption and the instinct to control, between her desire to be loved and her fear of abandonment. Drew sees this, and he knows that at the right moment, if he can plant just enough doubt and insecurity in her mind, she'll easily become another pawn in his hands. The relationships between Nina and Willow, Nina and Sunny, Nina and Carly, they are all fragile links that Drew can exploit. And he doesn't need force or threats. Just the right words, dropped as if by chance, seemingly random actions, gestures that create a sense of safety only to shatter it. Drew is gradually rewriting Nina's perception, making her doubt herself, abandon old ties, and depend entirely on him as her new anchor. But perhaps the most painful and haunting target Drew is aiming for is Portia, a woman on the verge of collapse after witnessing Curtis and Jordan's swift, merciless reunion. For Portia, it's not just the loss of a husband. It's the loss of dignity, of position, of all hope for the family she tried to hold on to. And in her weakest, emptiest moment, she becomes the perfect target for Drew, a man who needs a deeply wounded woman to completely break her down, then reconstruct her in his image. Portia once knew Drew's secrets, played a role in treating him, and even aided in some morally gray decisions. All of that can now be twisted, exaggerated, and used as a psychological weapon, making her feel not only guilty but utterly isolated, with no one to turn to but Drew. The frightening part isn't Drew shouting out his plan. It's that he executes each step with smooth, cold logic, leaving no obvious trace. That's why those around him still haven't truly grasped how serious the situation is. They think Drew is simply changing, trying to manage things, or behaving like a man dealing with trauma. But the truth is far darker. Drew is constructing a psychological web where the women around him become puppets. Not controlled by force, but by their minds, beliefs, memories, and emotions. The reunion between Curtis and Jordan wasn't just a romantic shock to Portia, it was the catalyst that made her more vulnerable than ever. When feelings of rejection, replacement, and abandonment take over her mind, it takes only a comforting word from Drew, once an ally, once on her side, once someone who understood her pain, for her to open up. And from there, Drew doesn't stop at empathy. He begins reprogramming Portia's entire belief system, making her question everything: Curtis, Jordan, herself, and eventually, what's really happening inside her own mind. The insanity here is that Portia may never realize she's being controlled until she's completely lost herself. Drew doesn't need to act like a lunatic to be the most terrifying villain. He's proving that the peak of cruelty doesn't come from explosive rage, but from quiet, deep, and persistent manipulation. When he targets Nina and Portia, he's not just attacking two women, he's building a sphere of influence, a gray zone where people lose all orientation and can no longer tell what's real. And this is just the beginning. If no one intervenes in time, Portia won't just lose Curtis. She'll lose herself. And Nina won't just lose Sonny. She'll lose the ability to tell which emotions are real and which ones Drew has programmed. This is no longer about personal change. This is mass brainwashing, carried out under the most familiar face, the face of a former hero, now a mask for a smiling monster. Drew is no longer simply an individual spiraling in pain and betrayal. He's becoming the center of a new power structure, built from emotional fragments, lost souls, and the easily led. His madness, perfectly hidden beneath a calm exterior, is creating an underground storm, one of the greatest psychological disasters Port Charles has ever faced. A new alliance has formed, not from voluntary loyalty or lasting affection, but through brainwashing, mind control, and psychological suffocation of the weakest. Drew doesn't need to threaten or spill blood. All he needs is to make others doubt themselves, question their memories, be suspicious of love, and from there, make them dependent on him as the only anchor they believe can keep them from falling apart. This new alliance is expanding rapidly and deliberately. After Willow, who was pulled into his manipulation by being separated from Michael and made to believe only Drew could understand her pain, Nina and Portia are the next links in the chain. With Nina, Drew doesn't have to do much. A few seemingly empathetic conversations, a few timely appearances during her lonely moments after being rejected by Sonny, these are enough to plant seeds of doubt and draw Nina into an emotional fog. Drew exploits the very things Nina once used to manipulate others. The feeling of abandonment, the longing for love, the fear of being cast aside. He uses his own face, the face of someone who once forgave, once stood beside her, to build trust, then corrupt it from within. And Nina, in her blindness, begins to believe in an alternate reality, where Drew isn't the danger, but the only one left truly on her side. Portia, meanwhile, is a psychologically ideal target. After watching Curtis, whom she sacrificed everything to keep, reunite with Jordan in the most brutal way possible, Portia nearly collapses. She loses her role as a wife, her belief in family, and most importantly, her sense of self. Drew, once a victim of questionable medical decisions that Portia helped implement, now approaches her with a different tone, empathy. No more accusations, only shared moments. No more confrontation, just quiet listening. As Portia battles guilt and abandonment, Drew is the only one who doesn't judge. But behind that calm facade is the start of a terrifying psychological tactic. He's leading Portia to believe that if Curtis left her for Jordan, maybe she's always been wrong, not good enough, and needs someone like Drew to see her real worth. The terrifying truth is that neither Nina nor Portia realizes they're being controlled. They believe they're stepping out of pain to find healing. But in reality, they're walking into a new nightmare, where Drew holds all the keys. He doesn't need to force anyone. He just needs to be there, at the right moment, in the right place, and welcome them into his vortex, where he not only leads but rewires how they perceive the world. And if this continues, the alliance Drew is building will no longer be a group of fragile individuals. It will become a reprogrammed community, people bearing the label of redeemed, but in truth, puppets being controlled by psychology instead of strings. The real disaster lies in the fact that Port Charles still hasn't noticed what's happening. Carly is too focused on fighting Nina. Jason is trying to find balance again after returning from the past. Curtis is lost in a fleeting happiness with Jordan. No one sees that Drew, their former friend, their old teammate, is changing people one by one. Not with violence, but with sweet words, perfectly timed appearances, the right hug, the seemingly harmless advice. And by the time they do realize it, the ones they love will no longer be whole. Willow won't trust Michael. Nina will drift from Sunny. Portia may turn against Curtis. And all of them, unconsciously, will defend Drew from any accusations, not because he's innocent, but because they no longer realize they're in the hands of a criminal. Drew is creating a new world, a parallel Port Charles where he brings peace, but it's a peace built from warped emotions, bent beliefs, and reprogrammed minds. This is no longer the story of one man. It is a new system, a new order, where power doesn't come from guns, but from the ability to make others willingly walk into a trap without realizing they're caught. And the disaster has only just begun. Drew is at the center of a new Port Charles nightmare, one deeply haunted not just by what he does, but by how he does it. He disrupts things not with loud noise or overt brutality, but with cold strategy, with psychological calculation executed with terrifying precision. What makes this madness especially dangerous is that what's happening is no longer just a matter of personal intrigue, but is being fueled by a technology, a sophisticated form of mind control or brainwashing. That Drew seems to have not only been the original victim of, but now taken over, refined, and wielded as an invisible but extremely effective weapon. Port Charles, accustomed to threats like bioweapons, family intrigue, and romantic betrayals, is now being pulled into a dark gray area where no one is sure if they are sane or have been affected by a sophisticated mind control system. Drew doesn't have to act violently. He just has to sow doubt, change beliefs, destroy people's sense of security, make them start to depend on him, not for obvious reasons, but because they truly believe he is the only one who understands them. And when that happens, they are no longer themselves. They are the versions Drew has shaped, little by little, through conversations, touches of the shoulder, well-timed hugs, and seemingly sincere but potentially behaviorally driven advice. The confirmation of the brainwashing technology is slowly but surely being revealed. The signs are becoming increasingly clear: Willow's sudden changes in behavior, Portia's growing emotional dependence, Nina's lack of control and confusion, and a series of strange cracks in relationships that once seemed unshakable. Individuals seem to be being pulled from their original selves, losing the ability to fight back, and no longer trusting the people they once loved. Instead, they look to Drew as a guide, a savior, who has actually made them so weak that they need saving. Port Charles, with its long history of intrigue and villainy, has never faced a threat like this. Once mainstream characters, Jason, Carly, Sunny, are scattered by their own issues, while Drew is slowly taking center stage, not through traditional power, but through a new obsession, the ability to manipulate minds silently and quietly. And when truth is twisted into plausibility, when victims don't realize they're being controlled, society slides into a state of chaos from which no one knows how to turn. The question is no longer whether Drew is a bad person. The question is now, how many more people will become his tools before someone is sober enough to realize? And when Port Charles looks directly at this obsession, is there anything left to save, or is there only a town full of seemingly free people, but actually programmed by an invisible hand wearing the face of a man who was once called a hero?